memorandum of understanding related to their site. And I want to begin by thanking the committee members for attending today. I know we've got at least one other member who's going to join us here in a moment. And we've got a wide array of stakeholders here with us today as well. So I'm hoping that this will be a good opportunity to address any remaining concerns, questions, proposed amendments, anything of that nature ahead of the second reading vote, which is has been deferred to the first meeting in April. And I do appreciate, I know he's not in the room with us, but I do appreciate the lead sponsor for kind of accommodating, and the administration for working together to accommodate the schedule of this committee, and specifically this, making sure that this meeting was able to happen with the potential to add amendments to the legislation if we, should choose to present any. So with that, we don't have like a firm agenda and, bullet point items here, but I was thinking because the scope and size of the TPAC Memorandum of Understanding is smaller, narrower than the larger agreement, we might start roughly with the TPAC MOU, if folks feel comfortable with that. Talk through any concerns, questions, clarifying stuff on that, and then we will move on to the broader master development agreement. I'm seeing some heads nodding. That's great. So thanks, folks. So the TPAC MOU, we've traditionally had like a presentation from someone. I know we didn't ask anyone to do that. Do we want to get a brief explanation of the TPAC MOU from someone on that side of the room, or do we want to assume that folks have the basic information that they would need about it to? Okay, I was about to say Councilman Mendes. Bob Mendes from the mayor's office. If you could just give us the too long didn't read version of the TPAC MOU, just so we can frame the conversation.
Sure, thanks, Chair. So one of the two pieces of legislation is a resolution to approve a non-binding memorandum of understanding with TPAC, with the idea of passing that now and then working during the summer to bring definitive agreements for council approval. So right now, it's a relatively short compared to the other legislation, just a memorandum of understanding. And the fundamental deal is that we would have TPAC fulfill the part of the Imagine East Bank plan that calls for a cultural institution on the East Bank by having TPAC relocate from its current home to basically behind the bridge building next to the pedestrian bridge. And in the MOU, we've got some diagrams that show the placement more carefully. I would say that the important things that we sketched out in the MOU are the location, and then there were some milestones for funding, because we want to make sure, Metro want to make sure that TPAC is able to move forward with the deal. We believe they will, but it sets out deadlines for them to get their funding together by, I think it's September 2025. And then we also lay out certain infrastructure sharing requirements where TPAC would take care of installing the roads adjacent. So that's Victory and Waterside, and that would give access to the TPAC location. And also reworking a part of the pedestrian bridge. And then importantly, because the pedestrian bridge is an important access point back and forth across the river, the agreement calls for TPAC to ensure that there isn't a point in time where pedestrian and bike access is shut down across the river while the work is going on. And I think that covers the high points of it.
Thank you, sir. So I have kind of at least one question or request for more information on that specifically. Do any other committee members have anything on the TPAC MOU, questions, clarifying concerns, anything? Okay, not seeing a lot. So the one thing that I really appreciate and what y'all have put forward so far on this is the creating a temporary alternative to the existing pedestrian bridge while it's needing to be closed during construction. And one question I had about that, I know that the language in here is, such that riders don't need to dismount, I think, and specifically like the grade on the existing pedestrian bridge on the east side is, well, on both sides, is fairly substantial. So do we have, I know we don't have a final engineered version, and I don't think we're going to put an exhibit in this. I mean, I guess we could, but I wasn't attempting to do that. But do we have any idea, like, will the grade be comparable? Will it be better? Will it be maybe worse? Do we have any idea of what the temporary solution looks like for access?
The temporary solution will not have a grade that's worse than the current condition. And last I saw, there were two possibilities. One is a consistent grade all the way down, and the other would have back and forth where there was grade and then a flat area, and then a grade and then a flat area. And whether you're coming up or down, that would help keep speeds in check. And if you were going up it and you had mobility challenges, it would give you a flat area to recover. But under any circumstances, it wouldn't be a worse grade than the current bridge.
Thank you. And that was my only real clarifying question. And I appreciate y'all's, folks in the cycling who get around via bicycle and sometimes on foot as well. We often feel like an afterthought in a lot of these discussions. I don't feel like that aspect has been an afterthought in this conversation, but you might keep getting questions about it because we're used to being an afterthought. And so thank y'all for addressing that kind of on the front end. Can we get a guarantee that the concession stand will be open and have fresh hot dogs on the rollers within 6 months of this agreement being signed? Oh, the Cumberland Park concession stand, the ghost concession stand.
I was wondering whether TPAC had hot dogs and I didn't know about it.
You've been missing.
We'll have to get back to you on that one, Councilmember.
All right. We'd love to see some activation of that area. It's a very cool spot. Well, thank you. I think that's maybe any other. Here we go. On TPAC, turn your mic on, please.
Yes.
Councilman Cap.
Thank you. I know that design approval for the building is with the planning department. Could you speak a little bit to how you envision that working and what principles will be brought to bear on that decision?
Sure, and I think there's broad agreement between the administration and TPAC about that. This location is going to be iconic. If you're in middle of Broadway looking east across the river, this is the building that you may see directly. It may be, the postcard for Nashville for a long time to come. And there isn't a design right now beyond just a very general ideas. And so there's a shared interest between Metro and TPAC that it be iconic. And so the planning department is interested in what it looks like from the various view sheds, but also making sure that it's not a block to access from the pedestrian bridge down into the rest of the East Bank. I think you all know there's when you come off the pedestrian bridge, it's some 20, 25 feet down to below, and being able to get people who are not going to TPAC past the building, and so it's an integrated experience and not a block to going past it. There's a shared interest there. I know TPAC has expressed us from the very beginning that they wish to activate both the part of where they touch on the pedestrian bridge up above, as well as a plaza that they intend to have at the ground level, more facing the river. They intend to activate both of those. And again, the planning department and the administration share that interest in making sure that that experience is good, is excellent, both for folks who are enjoying TPAC as well as passing by it one way or another. And those are the considerations that we've talked about, making sure come into play. And then I guess the last consideration is there's the functional job that we want to make sure TPAC can have as the programming that it plans to have on the site. So marrying up the making sure there's sufficient, the pedestrian bridge works right, the activation above and below works right, that they've got a building that works for them, and that the view sheds from different places are meet the level of seriousness of the location. Those are the things that we've talked about.
Thank you. And the approvals with the director of planning, is that right? Or who has the?
I can't remember whether we said planning or the director of planning, but it is our intention we're not putting it up for a referendum. And so we are having it to be a departmental approval.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gregg, you're recognized.
Along with that design approval, what I like about the current TPAC is there's various size venues within the building. Is that going to be the same approach for the new TPAC?
I will invite them up to share their exciting thoughts about that. Short answer, yes, but it's actually kind of fun to hear them talk about it.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm Jennifer Turner. I'm president and CEO at TPAC. The current building houses a 2,400 seat theater, 10,000 seat theater, and a 250 seat black box. All three theaters are used by all of our resident companies and TPAC for programming. In the new venue, we are looking at increasing the capacity of the 2,400 to 2,600 and the 1,000 seat to 1,200. And then the black box would then have probably a top capacity of maybe 450, 500 at the most, but it would be a flexible space that could be used for performances or dinners or events or lectures, anything you're thinking of. And then right now we have one rehearsal space tucked in the backstage areas, and we're looking at adding 3 more. So we would have 4 rehearsal spaces in the venue that are performance equipped, so they could host small arts organizations, different types of community performances, rehearsals, tech, any sort of activity like that.
Exciting, and I appreciate that we're carrying that same concept forward because there's so many different levels of performances that come through town, and I just felt that was important.
Sure. Stay.
Well, while we're on TPAC, if you'd stay with us, we'll see if we have any more questions or comments. And Councilmember Allen, just to catch you up, thanks for joining us. And we decided to kind of try and do the TPAC conversation on the front end. So if there's anything, questions, concerns, comments on the TPAC MOU, anything related to that, we've got Bob Mendes and Jennifer Turner, is it?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Here with us from TPAC. So any other TPAC questions, concerns, anything? Councilman Coopin, Vice Chair Coopin.
Thank you so much, Chair. Just a couple questions. First of all, can you speak to the parking and access of the site? How are people going to get to and from shows, performances, things like that, both just regularly and then around football games or other events at the new stadium?
Sure, I'll give you the Metro perspective, which will cover the wider area as well as TPAC, and then invite Ms. Turner to add her thoughts on it. There's been a trend in urban design, and the council last term took steps in the direction of let's not overbuild parking, and their parking minimums were removed in the UDO, I think, last term, and we're bringing that same philosophy to the East Bank of, we may end up having to build a lot of parking over a 15-year time horizon on the East Bank, but for now, our intention is to not replace a horizontal sea of empty parking spaces with pillars of empty parking spaces. And so we philosophically, we are not going to rush into building a lot of structured parking garages. In addition to it being the wrong thing to do from a design perspective, from just a fiscal point of view, we may one day be able to use the Titan Stadium sales tax capture zone to help fund some parking garages to the extent we need them. But right now, there's no sales tax outside the stadium on the East Bank, and so we don't have a bucket of money. So if we said, you know what, Metro wants, like, we want to become parking garage owners, and let's build a bunch of spaces, we would have to pay for it out of general obligation bonds. And between the philosophy of not wanting to overbuild and the fact that we'd have to pay for it out of general obligation bond debt right now, and the fact that they're, with them being directly on the pedestrian bridge, there's a quick walk to a bunch of parking spaces that exist on the current downtown side of the river. So with all that, what we've asked for in the deal is to, that TPAC takes care of its own parking. We're not expressly building any parking garages for them. I guess the last thing I'll mention is on the other side of the pedestrian bridge, Parcel F, so-called Parcel F, that Fallon will develop. By the time Fallon gets to Parcel F, the market calls for a bunch of parking spaces for TPAC or otherwise, I'm sure that the private developer, Fallon, paying rent to us, Metro will build parking garages. And if that's where the maximum money is at the time, that's what we'll do. So that's been our philosophy about how to approach parking on the East Bank generally and TPAC in particular. But I'll let Ms. Turner talk about TPAC's perspective on it.
Sure. Parking is a big concern for us, obviously, because if we have high retention of patrons, especially for season subscriptions, it's the thing that we get asked about the most is what's going to happen. We do believe that the location, as Bob described, is going to add alternative paths of travel for our patrons, that they're going to be able to access the building in different ways. We do believe that depending on the type of amenities that are built into the East Bank, they're going to be coming early and staying late, something that they don't have the opportunity to do now. So the patterns of behavior are going to change for our patrons, but we still have to keep it top of mind. One thing that wasn't, I think you asked about coordination with the Titans, and that is important. There are a number of performing arts and entertainment venues in markets across the country that coexist within a couple block radius of a major sports facility. And it requires coordination on behalf of the two organizations and the others that are impacted in the area. There are things from a schedule perspective that both TPAC can do, and we know that the Titans, can't change a game time, but we have some flexibility with when we program and when we put things on our stages. So it's going to require coordination and cooperation and discussion, and also working with other partners. We right now work with the Downtown Partnership with their shuttle program. We're going to have to find different partners that service our new location in a new way, but it is a top of mind priority for us to have that solved. We anticipate there's going to be a short-term solution after we first arrive on the site, and then a long-term solution.
Thank you. And I just want to share that I'm really excited for the new facility. I've seen some early sketches and they look phenomenal. And just really excited to have you all across the river and part of the East Bank. So thanks for being here.
Okay, anything else did I see your Councilmember Allen on TPAC?
Thank you. I guess just to drill a little bit deeper than that, I know that part of the Titans plan was to create a shuttle system that would, at least on game days, reduce the amount of cars that needed to be parked on site, and that actually is hopefully something that we'll see before the new stadium gets built, just because they've said that's one of the things that they're their customers already said is the least favorite part of many people's experience is getting all those cars trying to leave at the same time. So it can be better if we do create good shuttle systems, and I'm not sure if this is a joint question or who it's actually directed at. But in terms of the coordination question and the shuttle question together, is there any possibility for coordination on just ensuring that there are lots of ways for people to get across the river other than driving up in their own car?
I think this is one where it probably is helpful to hear both our perspectives. I think you'll hear that they're in sync with each other. We've had direct conversations with the Titans, and let me just take a little side trip. Y'all know that the O'Connell administration came in office same time you guys did. It's like 5 months ago, and we've been racing since then to reach the agreement with Fallon and the Titans. And TPAC has been great in stepping up. But reality is we've only had a couple months of conversations with them, not 5 months worth of conversations. So this is a thing that there's a great deal of unification around the idea that there is absolutely a shared interest between Fallon, the Titans, Metro, and TPAC to have it be sensible, and everybody shares the objective that we're not going to swap a sea of empty spaces for pillars of empty spaces. And so beyond that agreed upon approach, it's not ready for prime time about exactly what's going to happen. I do believe that because the Titans very much are going to have fewer parking spaces in the next couple of years because a lot of their parking lots are going to be tied up for construction. They have a massive interest in moving the ball forward on a shuttle solution. And we have talked to them in the mayor's office about ways to move that forward. We've talked to NDOT that this is a conversation that as soon as we get a breath from getting these agreements put together in the last 5 months, that's a thing we definitely want to work on next. So from Metro's perspective, and I think the Titans' perspective, very much on the radar, working on it, but other than promises that we all know we need to do it, nothing concrete to share at this time.
That's a starting point. Thank you.
And I believe we memorialize that spirit of cooperation in the document.
Good point.
Vice Chair Coopin?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, another question. Curious to know about the naming of theaters. They currently have names, of course. Are those names carrying across the river, or is there maybe new names being discussed? Is it too early to figure that out or know about that yet?
He's fishing for the Jacob Coopin Memorial.
I think you gotta
You'll
be dead
have to-
first. I don't want to be that.
Fight for the Mendes Theater.
The Mendes Theater's got a good rig to it, I have to say.
The grant from the state requires us to do a 20% fundraising match. So the grant last year was $200 million. We are required to raise 20% of that money. We are currently in fundraising, and then subsequent grants from the state would require the same type of match. We're anticipating about $100 million of private fundraise. Some of that will be naming. Their names won't carry over because it will no longer be a state building. So we will have the opportunity to have different naming opportunities associated with the building, and that's part of the fundraising campaign.
Okay, I look forward to seeing you at the Bob Mendes Theater. Thanks.
All right, any other questions, anything on TPAC while we've got him here? I'm not seeing any. Ms. Turner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Do you want me to?
I imagine that you can probably stay there for the time being, Mr. Mendes. So we're going to move on to the broader 440-ish page agreement. This is the master developer agreement between Metro and Fallon Company. And again, I don't, if you want to give the 5-minute version of this, I think most folks are aware, but if you, just for the framing the conversation, if you have the 5-minute version or less.
we got some land, we're going to build some stuff. The bigger picture, the East Bank, from the scrapyard up to where the interstate crosses to go west near Metro Center is about 550 acres. Metro owns about 130 of those between the KVB Bridge and the Woodland Street Bridge. 20 of those are going to be for the new football stadium, and Metro seeks to develop the remaining 110 acres that it has. The ordinance before you is for approval of a master development agreement for 30 of those 110 acres that is depicted in the document, but basically runs mostly from the football stadium toward the river where the pedestrian bridge crosses. And the idea in the master development agreement is we'd be agreeing with the Fallon Company for the pacing and staging of what would be in those 30 acres. We've, coming out of the Imagine East Bank plan, which we've discussed at previous meetings, the community stated a goal that we should have a neighborhood on the East Bank. And so we've tried to incentivize residential units. We've tried to incentivize affordable housing. We've tried to keep our infrastructure spend to a minimum. And we've heard the community loud and clear that while we value our tourism on Broadway and the surrounding area on the west side of the river, that we like to keep the party on in downtown as much as possible and have an actual neighborhood. And so there are additional components built into the deal to where we will, through a change in the downtown code, ask you all to limit the concentration of bars on the East Bank. We've limited the number of hotels that can be built in these 30 acres, and we've made it so short-term rentals would be prohibited in the 30 acres to keep it from being essentially a de facto hotel zone for large events. And the goal is to have a mixed income, mixed use neighborhood that reflects who Nashville is in a dense urban environment that values pedestrian and bike mobility and multimodal transportation. And I think that's the high points, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mendes. Well, I've got a few items, hoping other folks have some questions, concerns as well. So who would like to get us going here? Well, I'll circle back to a little bit of the parking conversation that we had with TPAC. So thinking about the surface parking today, I think I've heard, I'm not sure how, is it roughly 7,000 spaces?
I think it's 7,500.
7,500 spaces exist today. So, as the site for the new stadium kind of gets cordoned off, and then there's a need to store materials related to construction and competing uses, construction for TPAC, all these infrastructure projects that will be happening and tearing up sections of that, is Metro required, even within that entire context, to maintain 2,000 clear spaces? Or say if the Titans have a bunch of infrastructure pipes that are waiting to go into the ground, covering X amount of spaces, does that count toward the 2,000 that we're required to maintain at all times? Or what I'm concerned about is us getting into a situation where we're having to find more parking because of all this activity that is happening on what is today the surface parking lots.
So breaking that down a little bit, we spent a lot of time thinking about this. We're confident that the Titans construction activity won't keep Metro from honoring the agreements made last year. And it's and specifically, there's a certain area north of the new stadium that is designated as basically a laydown lot that the Titans need to stay in that area. And if they were to expand beyond that, they'd have to come talk to Metro first. So they wouldn't be able to unilaterally cut into the spaces, the 2,000 spaces we need to provide. And then it's important to remember that, and I haven't internalized the names of all the parking lots, but Metro has to provide 2,000 spaces for every year, in addition to certain spaces that are already also have to be kept open and available for the Titans during construction. So we're not worried about the Titans logistics cutting into our spaces. A thing we have worried about is that if both Fallon and TPAC get going quickly and aggressively, which we would love, there's the possibility that their collective construction sites and lay-down lots might knock us under 2,000 parking spaces. And we intend, I think those of you are familiar with construction on the downtown side of the river, very large buildings are built with pretty small lay-down lots in an urban area. So we're intending to not let Fallon and TPAC's contractors just spread out at their heart's content. We're intending to keep them to as tight a laydown lot as they might have if they were trying to build something on the downtown side of the river. But if enough construction gets going, maybe we'll be constricted. So part of what one of the tweaks that we've got in the agreement from last year is that if Metro needs to during football stadium construction, if we're squeezed a little bit, we can move up to 500 spaces outside the immediate campus to a different site as long as it's, I think, within a half mile. And we believe that we're not going to be constricted under 2,000. We think it could be close. And this is a place where the Titans are being a good neighbor and have given us some flexibility above and beyond what we had last year. So we think it's manageable without getting into costing us money.
Thank you. I'll recognize next whoever would like to, Vice Chair Coopan.
We'll each take one and keep going around. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Turner mentioned earlier the shuttles provided by Downtown Partnership, and I know that the Business Improvement District downtown has been a great asset to the community. What conversations, if any, have we had about moving a Business Improvement District over to the East Bank? Is that going to be more of a Fallon-managed situation? Is that a bid conversation, or where are we with that?
Yeah, so we're in the preliminary stages of thinking about that. I think there's 3 business improvement districts in Nashville, downtown, the Gulch, and then out in Antioch's Century Farms. And they all operate a little bit differently. And the due diligence we've done indicates that you should expect every business improvement district or bid to operate a little bit differently depending on what the needs are. If we end up with one on the East Bank, and we intend on exploring these conversations, we think, because we're at the early stages of construction's not imminent, that we've got time, maybe as long as a couple of years, to figure this out. But one thing that jumps off the page is that our existing bids don't have the kind of massive property owners or controllers that we have. We've got Oracle, we've got RMR, the 18 acres with the truck stop, we've got the Titans, we've got Fallon now, and probably each one of those really large parties probably has no interest in a bid internally to their project because they intend on maintaining standards. On the East Bank, it could be, and again, no actual conversations, this has just been thought exercises so far among a handful of people. But it could be that on the East Bank, the role for a bid is maintaining green space. But that's a thing that is coming later, and we are anticipating probably doing a feasibility study at some point. And again, we have probably a couple of years to get this thought about, created, consensus, squared away and into existence. So that's where we're at with that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm in kind of a tough position because I'm having to turn and see who might have. Well, let's go around the table. Anything, Councilmember Allen?
A general one that I had asked you earlier, Director Mendes, which was, there's several statements in the agreement that just mention that the administration will have the authority to make changes that are still in the spirit of the agreement. And I understand the need, for some nimbleness there, so I am not advocating against that in any way, but would love to know if there are guardrails that we know will be in place that will maintain certain key aspects.
We're going to have Jeff Oldham,
Great, thank you.
Metro's lawyer from Bassberry and Sims, talk about that one.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me. So I think if you read each of these agreements in light of the ordinance for each agreement says authorized to execute and deliver these agreements, and after they're executed and delivered, consent, waive, make amendments, but only if they are materially consistent with the terms that are in front of council today. So a material deviation would have to come back to council for approval, whether it's a consent or a waiver or an amendment. An immaterial one could be handled administratively.
And I'm guessing material consistent is a legal term that we can rely on. I mean, like for on
It's-
affordable housing, we've talked about certain numbers, but maybe
Yeah,
we need to go up and down plus or
I mean,
minus
you-
10%.
You can speak to this. I mean, I think that's clearly a material term.
It's definitely a material term. And I don't know,
Material
Mr. Oldham, you want to, I'll let you share whether this formulation is consistent with how previous agreements have worked.
It is, I'd say so there's a range. You can see anything from it's approved, do what you want. That would be on one end. The Titans deal was much more like this, where the council, and this largely came from council amendments on the floor, where the council sought to sort of restrain future action to a materiality standard. And so this is more in line with the Titans approval.
Gotcha. Okay, that sounds good. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so can you just educate me a little bit on what, in non-lawyer language, material might encompass?
And if it would help, I think we would entertain an amendment that puts somewhere appropriate in the document that changes to the affordable housing standards is considered material, if that would help.
Okay.
Generally, I guess way back when I practiced law, a client asked me this question. There might be some hard questions along the way, but for the most part, materiality when you see it. And because these are parties that are working together for a long time, and Fallon is going to be financing with very sophisticated lenders because of the amount of money involved. There's a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure, I'm sure any lender who is lending on a project like this is going to want to err on the side of materiality, covering more things, not less things. So I think I might have been one of the ones who's complained about deals that are just open-ended, administration, do whatever you want. I think in previous things over the last 8 years, I think there were times when I brought this materiality standard in as a compromise we struck that was fair and workable. But when it comes to affordable housing, I think we would, and I'd have to talk to Fallon, but I think we'd entertain an amendment that specifically said changes to affordable housing standards are material.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you for the explanation.
All right, we'll adopt, as Councilmember Allen suggested, of just kind of going around and if you want to take 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours with your questions.
I
Councilman.
hope not 20 minutes or 2 hours.
Conceivable.
Have a lot of sticky notes, but most of them are not substantive, so I will not bring them up right now. I was a little curious, I guess sort of starting backwards on my list with what Councilmember Coopin brought up. Under the campus operations agreement, it talks about common areas and a common area entity. Is that where you would either have a manager or potentially like a bid district that would manage that area?
What an excellent question.
Yeah, so I don't think, and you guys can speak up, I don't think Fallon's made any decision yet as to whether to have a common area entity. If they had, pick a parcel, parcel C or parcel F, that did have some common spaces, the various tenants on that parcel could form an entity and manage that space. I think the provision you're asking about says if they do that, you got to deal with that entity and not the tenants. But then I think at the end it goes on to say, but you can't create one that touches on any public realm space at all without our approval. So if they want to manage their privately leased space in a common way, we're happy to accommodate that and respect that organization. But to the extent, to the extent that any of that involves any sort of public areas, that's totally under our control.
Okay, thanks. I would note, I think Century Farms is just one large owner for that bid, but it's triple net leases, so they are able to pass along those property taxes. Okay. Let's see here. For the East Bank Authority, I believe that legislation is pending in the state. I guess if there's an update to that, I would be curious, or a backup plan. I think since it hasn't passed yet, you sort of never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, so there is East Bank Development Authority legislation pending at the state and the Senate and the House. I think it's currently referred to two committees in the House, maybe local government and budget. And in the Senate, I think there are no committees, and it's maybe on the Senate agenda for next Monday, was the last I heard. And we continue to work that, like, as you all know, being a legislative body, making predictions about what's going to happen is not a smart thing to do. So other than saying that we're working hard with any legislator who's got questions, and with our lobbying team up there, we feel cautiously optimistic we can get to the finish line. And of course, passing the state doesn't put it into effect. It would have to then come to the Metro Council, and it would be subject to y'all's approval, 2/3 approval, 27 votes. So we're definitely not assuming that there will be an East Bank Development Authority. We think it would be the best, most efficient way to go, but we're not, we're not banking on it. We have negotiated the legislation agreements that you have before you to really be indifferent about whether the authority comes into existence or not, because we needed to negotiate it not knowing whether or not there would be an authority. So it just doesn't matter. Like, the agreement, where the development's going to happen either way, we think more efficiently with an authority. As far as a Plan B goes, Metro would have other options. Might involve working with MDHA, might involve working with IDB, might involve standing up a separate department. I think, as you all know, last term, Metro took a turn into the real estate business between buying a 70-acre mall in Antioch and a $25 million closed school at 88 Hermitage, and this. And so it could be that if none of the above seem like the right fit, maybe a development arm inside Metro could be stood up. So there are options. This is another one where, we know what we want it solved. We know what we think the best answer is. But if it doesn't pass the state, then there's other choices that we can pick between.
And I noticed that it said the executive director of the East Bank Authority would be the person with signatory authority. Typically, that's the chair of the board. And forgive me, I have not read the state legislation. But how would you envision that would be set up?
I'm not sure if it's the chair for everything. Like, our models are, the Convention Center Authority from a governance point of view is the closest model. 7 members appointed by Metro, 3 ex officio, that are different state officials. And what we've proposed for the East Bank Development Authority would have the same governance model as the convention center. I believe Mr. Starks at the Convention Center Authority and Mr. Krulin at the Airport Authority, where there's very niche expertise in each case. We think that the level of expertise needed to run the East Bank coherently would be most akin to those things. And so we are anticipating that administratively, it would be the executive director.
Let's see here. In the lease on page 11, there's just a standard list of noxious uses. 2 of those, I just have questions about 2 of those. One is a dry cleaner, and one is a secondhand retail store. I think if you're looking at a neighborhood, the ability to at some point potentially have a dry cleaner might be helpful. And then also, I think some of our most beloved local retail shops are secondhand, whether it's ULI, whether it's a record store, anything like that. And I think I understand where that list probably came from, but I'm not sure it's relevant to the East Bank to have those 2 listed as noxious uses.
So I've got it. Number 5, the secondhand store, and what's the other one?
The dry cleaner.
Do you have which number that is? I believe you. 4. Number 4. I hear you. We hadn't thought about that.
I think that those are the only 2.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the dry cleaner one, I'm sure comes around to the fact that that's, typically got some environmental issues that we might not want. I hear you about secondhand storage. Let me take a look at those.
Okay,
Um,
thanks.
You got that?
And then I was a little confused, sort of looking at 3 different sections, 5.4.1, 5.15, and 6.3.6. It's talking about the zoning, and I think where I got confused is 5.4.1. Let's see here. Let me figure out what page this is here. It's one of these gazillions. It talks about a public space framework plan, and I couldn't find that defined anywhere, and I didn't know if that was the same plan we were talking about in 636, which is just the DTC. And then I also thought the DTC wasn't gonna have bonus height, so I didn't know if DTC was actually the right term to use there. And just trying to understand those 3 sections together, public space framework plan term, and if DTC is the right thing to reference, given that we talked about not doing bonus height for the East Bank.
So a couple things.
It's a lot more questions.
One, we might need to get back to you on getting it all together, because that's a
Okay.
bunch of sections. And 2, when Anna Greider from Planning here gives an answer here in a second, we might have to mesh up Jeff Oldham's understanding of the legal documents, and Anna hasn't been involved in the actual legal documents, but she's going to be the best person to talk about the framework part. So let's grab that corner of the table and see if we can answer it.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Anna Greider with Metro Planning. The public realm framework plan is something we've requested of Fallon, and you could kind of compare it to something we might get in a preliminary SP. For example, the Newhoff SP is a good one to look at. But the downtown code is our zoning requirements, but we would like a greater level of detail in the public open space and how those spaces relate to the development, the size and scale. And so we've asked Fallon to complete this work, which would be an analysis of where the open spaces are, where the public passageways are, their character and feel, where are the intimate spaces, where are the bigger spaces, to help us get a sense of scale. Although it looks small on the map, it's 30 acres. That's a lot. And the planning department would really like Fallon to begin with the public spaces and how those are going to be created and feel. And the downtown code is more of a blunt instrument in terms of regulations and doesn't really give us that sense. So typically in a specific plan process, we would be doing this with a developer, which is saying, okay, these are the entitlements you're interested in. Show us, what are the advantages to the city of us giving you greater height or other, entitlements? Are you preserving a historic building? Are you providing a connection to a greenway? So the public realm framework plan will provide us with that greater level of detail than just the downtown code.
And from my perspective in being on the front end of the negotiation on behalf of the city, this is a thing that is above and beyond zoning. But what we're trying to balance in all this is we've got our planning department telling me loud and clear, we want to know that it's not going to look like junk. We want to know that it's going to look awesome. And it's hard to write into the zoning code, it's got to look awesome. And and
You can write anything.
and Fallon has reacted in the negotiation with saying, I'm paraphrasing, they put it a lot more politely than this, but they've basically said, like, Mendes, it's 30 acres. Like, we're not there yet. It's
They just said it's going to be awesome, right?
right, and they say it's going to be awesome. And so trying to bridge the fact that we're talking about 10, 15 years worth of development, and we want to know that it's going to be awesome, and they promise it's going to be. This is what we came up with, that they're going to drill down on this public realm framework. And we've told them, and they understand, that the condition of the planning department swinging through the changes to the downtown code is getting mutual happiness between the parties about the public realm, so that planning, when we get to the downtown code, can say, we feel good about the way it's going to look. And that's where that aspect came into it.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I like your lay nerd, by the way.
Oh.
The planning nerd.
Planning nerd.
Nashville next.
And then you asked about the bonus.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, if that's the case, it might be defined in these 400 pages. We obviously just had the PDF copy that was available on Legistar, so if I was like trying to, can you? I really was hoping for like a word to search for it, but just mindful how long it will take to complete this agreement might help to define that in the document, since it looks like a defined term.
All right, we'll look at that.
Yeah, and then the downtown code, is if there's not going to be a height bonus, or maybe there is, but do we want to call it the same classification, or just should we be referring to it as something else?
And what section?
636.
Let's
So it
just-
says it should be rezoned to the downtown code zoning classification, but I thought it was going to be a little different, so I just wasn't sure, but maybe I misunderstood that. Like it'll have its own form.
It will be its own, it will be the east use subdistrict, and the downtown code currently has central, northwest. So this will be a new subdistrict, so it isn't taking exactly what is allowed downtown and putting it on the east bank. It's creating the east subdistrict.
And we understand you don't have the downtown code draft yet, but like Anna said, it will be a different district, so it won't be the exact same
Okay.
rules as in the current downtown code.
Okay. I think I only have one question left. The hotel maximum definition? mentions that a residential building which includes a hotel use shall not be considered a hotel. Is there any plan for residential building with hotel? I thought residential and hotel were being kept separate.
I think, well, Jeff might have to pick me up on this, but in Nashville, there are definitely some combined residential and hotel buildings, and we sought to basically define that if, I think it's 60% residential, if it's 60% residential, it could qualify as a residential building as opposed to hotel. And I think what I didn't know this before the negotiation, but I understand the standard is go 50/50, and we asked to have it get pushed up to 60/40 to have it be predominantly residential, and yeah, that was one of the things they agreed to in the end.
If I may speak to the zoning just real quickly, I think it's section 5.15. Basically what it says is if you guys don't approve a zoning, and that's coming later this year, the whole thing's off. And that the public realm framework is part of planning's prerequisite to bringing a zoning plan to you. And so part of the reason I think it's not defined is because it's so baked into the zoning that's going to be coming to you and has no effect or implication beyond that. Yeah, so it's, if it doesn't happen, zoning doesn't happen. If zoning doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. Yeah.
What he said.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. So I'll run through a couple of my questions here. I've got kind of like three buckets of questions and comments, starting with workforce, and it's great to see a workforce development plan in this proposed agreement. I had a couple of thoughts and notes to get y'all's feedback on. One, so under career training and job placement, pre-apprenticeship training, that's fantastic. It specifies a particular certification, which is the NCCER certification, which a lot of our apprenticeship programs, that is a federally registered apprenticeship program, but a lot of ours, especially one notable one here, the MC3 program, which is just kicked off a permanent fixture at Maplewood High School, which we're very excited about in District 5 to have our Maplewood students have direct access to that program on campus. The mayor was there last year for the kickoff of that program. Very excited. But anyway, they use a different certification than NCCER. So just making sure that we have, like, we're casting a wide net and allowing as much participation in this workforce development program as possible. Could we move that from NCCER to just any federally registered apprenticeship program, which would, I think, allow some other groups to participate in this potentially?
Yes, and Chair, for everybody, I just want to mention I appreciate you bringing your concerns about workforce development issues to us to try to make this be better. And on that one, I've had a chance to talk to Fallon, and we'll be able to have an amendment that broadens that reference to include other approved apprenticeship programs.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And looking at the sections around like worker protections, wage theft, it's great to see that commitment and know that that's going to be paid attention to. Living wage is shouted out, which I think is great, to kind of have a floor that everyone's striving for throughout the project. One thing that we do see around the industry, though, is we see this in too many industries, is misclassification of workers. So is there any way that we can weigh partners who are definitely not doing that higher, or can we say that in the same way that we're trying to set a wage floor, we're setting a misclassification floor to say that, you know, obviously there's legitimate independent contractors that can be worked with to do very technically specific work, but, we don't want just like general laborers. We don't, it's unfair for one contractor to be bidding when they've got employees and then another that's got misclassified folks as 1099. So is there anything that we could do to shore that aspect up?
Yes, and this is one, I appreciate you raising this to me. I understand from Fallon that a private group has raised this question with them too. And I'll be in a position to get you some language that I think will reflect a commitment from Fallon to run the construction sites in a way that there's a commitment to not misclassify employees as 1099 contractors. So we'll get you something to look at on that. But I understand from Fallon, they've got a strong commitment to not tolerate misclassification of employees.
That's excellent. Well, thank you all for continuing to work on those issues. There's not a lot about transit in this agreement. I mean, the transit center's coming down the road. There's some assignment of responsibility for the boulevard. And I'm just thinking back to our experience, my personal experience and the council's experience with the River North Infrastructure Project that we approved early in the last term. And the way that was, it initially came to us with exhibits of cross-sections of, designed streets. And I know we're not there yet. I'm certainly not asking for that. But, we took a look at those as a body and said, there's a lot of issues with these streets. These bike lanes don't work for X, Y reason. I think they might have had some 13-foot travel lanes in the middle of what's supposed to be an urban streetscape. And so, as I was working to kind of improve those, the pushback from some stakeholders or the request from some stakeholders was, well, let's just not have an exhibit in there. And, we assure you we're going to do everything the way that you hope to see it, and we'll come check in with you. But we, as a body, we decided to, make sure there was an exhibit attached that said, no, this is what we want to see here. We're paying for this infrastructure, and we want to see safe and accessible streets over there, which they're beautiful. If you haven't gone to check them out yet, just north of Topgolf, brand new streets with great sidewalks, bike lanes, everything, and appropriate lane widths for an urban area. So anyway, all that to say, I know we're not going to get cross sections of design streets because they're not engineered, and we don't even know right-of-way specifics in some spots and things like that. But is there anything we can put in to set a floor or at least a floor or an expectation? Like, can we call, like, we're going to use NACTO standards on these street layouts, or no lane shall be over 9 foot. I don't think anybody's going to agree with 9 foot as a minimum or as a maximum. But can we put even just like some verbal, like not cross sections, but like some kind of commitment or standards of like a floor of all streets shall be to these standards?
Yeah, I was glad you brought this one up too, because as often as possible, we've been trying to make the agreement so it can last 99 years. And we know that there will be multiple administrations, hopefully not too many multiple, but there'll be more than one administration to get these things built, probably most likely more than two. And we do want to make it stand the test of time. To that end, I'm told that if you think about a 99-year time horizon, just like identifying like NACTO standards runs the risk of that falls out of vogue 15 years down the road. So I got to stop saying down the road when I'm talking about streets. I've got some language I haven't had a chance to forward you yet that we think will capture what we currently think about what streets should look like, and that will be the statement of intent that you're looking for, and help us all sort of lock in what the intent is on it.
And I guess part of my desire to have that in there is so that, if there is a whatever the term, material deviation from what's in the agreement, that would at least get brought to the public's attention and to this council or a future council's attention and have appropriate deliberation, discussion, debate, and awareness about it. So that's, again, I know we don't have cross-sections, we don't have it engineered yet, but something in there that's going to push us in the right direction and make sure that we're having a conversation if anybody tries to move it away from that direction in the future.
Yeah.
That's my goal with that. So
I'll get you some language to look at for a possible amendment.
thank you. Thank you very much. And so, yeah, I mean, the three buckets I've been looking at are workforce, transit, and affordability. And I know that y'all have used, from the Imagine East Bank and all of the feedback that we've all gotten in our times in office about affordable housing in Nashville and hopes for the East Bank. So I really appreciate what's in here, the AMI commitments, the 2 buildings, the kind of mixed income aspect of the market rate buildings, all of that. Some of my thinking about this is that, as this project goes to the various for LIHTC credits, for Barnes funding, for whatever else is used to finance these affordable units, like it's undeniable, I think, that the gravity of this project is going to put extra attention and consideration to these applications, right? So there's a limited pool in every Barnes round, and I think we know that this is likely to be successful just because of the gravity of the project when they go apply for these things. So, like, making sure that we are maximizing those affordable housing dollars and this opportunity at this site of getting family suitable units, which are, I would say, the most dire need of affordable housing units in Nashville is for 2 and 3 bedroom units. We have AMI figures in here, and that's great. Can we make any kind of commitment? Can we set a floor for how many of these would be family suitable, meaning 2 and 3 bedroom units, especially the 600 across the 2 buildings, but I mean, I don't know if we can do anything on the market rate units, but is that feasible?
And this is another one, I appreciate you raising the question in advance, so had some time to talk to Fallon and their affordable housing partner, Holiday Construction, I think most of you know, because they're local. So I'll give the longer answer after the shorter answer of, yes, we can put in the agreement a floor of for the all affordable buildings of how many units will be 2 and 3 bedrooms, and what we think is reasonable would be to say the floor would be 15% would be 2 and 3 bedroom, and drilling down on the why on that. I want to, here's the story, and this gets into the weeds on some stuff, but I know getting in the weeds is important. At every point in the negotiation, because we've been going relatively quickly, my experience has been that Fallon is reasonable and flexible up until the point where something becomes unfinanceable with a bank. And then when they got to a point on any given topic, whether that was infrastructure or paying for parking garages, where my demands, Metro's demands reached the point where you couldn't get financing anymore, they said so. And then we checked it out with our lawyers and consultants about, hey, we're being told by Fallon that if we cross this line, they can't get it financed. What do you think? Is that right? And to a specific, every single time when they said that and we vetted it, it turned out to be accurate, no BS answer, which we appreciated because we were trying to negotiate quickly. So Fallon Holiday took the early part of this week to look into this question, and the information, and I'll ask Holiday to speak to this in a second, is that going beyond that gets beyond what exists in the market and what is financeable. And so that's why 15% cumulative for 2 and 3 bedroom units is what the floor is. And beyond that, we get into a situation where it's really not financeable. And again, when that claim has been made by Fallon and Holiday in the negotiation, we've vetted it with our professionals and consultants and have found that they've been telling us the truth about that. So that's where we're at on that, Mr. Parker, Councilman Parker.
Thank you, sir. If we might be able to invite Mr. Holliday up here. I had a question about, so we had the experience of working together on the River Chase project, and when project-based vouchers were added to the mix, that helped us improve the family suitable unit count there, and the mix, the makeup, and the affordability levels. So in your view, and if we think that 15 is the floor, what could take us higher than 15? Could project-based vouchers get us higher than 15? What would it, in your view, you've put together a lot of these projects, like what would it take to get us higher? And if you could please introduce yourself.
Yes, yeah, thank you for having me. Evan Holiday, Holiday Ventures. Good to see you all. Yes, to answer your question, I think ultimately with any affordable housing development, as you all are keenly aware, it takes a whole lot of different resources, different funding, different tools, and it's still very hard to figure out how to put all it together and actually make financial sense of it, and something that, we rely on the LIHTC investors, we rely on a lender, we rely on government funding tools to really bring all that together. And from day one, we've been assuming, and not so much assuming, but saying that generally our underwriting was already anticipating some form of vouchers, project-based vouchers in partnership with MDHA. And so, we're a mission-driven affordable housing development group. We want to create as many affordable housing units as we can, and also, studios to 3 bedrooms and hitting all different family sizes. But we also know that, we live in the box of, what we can finance today. And so we didn't want to overcommit ourselves, given what we know today is available, and the funding tools that we have available. That is what we thought we could deliver on. We'll strive and do our best to be able to over-deliver on that, but we also don't want to commit ourselves to anything further than that right now.
Okay, thank you. So you're already factoring PBVs into that 15% figure is what you're saying.
Yes.
So that's not some silver bullet that's going to push it up, but you're going to do what you can to deliver more than 15 is what I'm hearing.
Yes, yeah, correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for my list of questions right now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Cap, do you have anything?
Sure, thank you, and not to duplicate all that previous material, but thank you all for asking that stuff, and I appreciate the answer about the family-sized units as well. That's very important to me. One question for Director Mendes. You mentioned a potential shuttle to Titans games. It sounded like that maybe as soon as this fall, and of course, you can't speak for other parties, but if that's something that seems like it may be under discussion as soon as the upcoming season, what would Metro like to see there, or what do you think is feasible there?
Yeah, and I want to be clear, like, we've discussed that we need to discuss it. And I, the Titans are having their total number of parking spaces constricted, so I genuinely believe they want it figured out more than anybody. They have expressed clearly to the O'Connell administration that they want some help, need some help to think about it carefully and not unilaterally. And honest to God, other than having, that's the entirety of the discussion so far. As far as details about from where and how many and how often, like all that is not even the first discussion yet, because we need to get past this part first. So that's where we're at with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But thank you for thinking of it and for continuing to.
Thanks.
I think that's all I have for now, Chair.
Thank you. Well, we'll kind of just go around the ring again to see if anybody has any for a second round. Vice Chair Coopin, you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple more questions for y'all. Appreciate, to echo Councilman Capp's sentiments, appreciate y'all being here and answering questions. As many people in this room know, I've spent quite a bit of my first 6 months dealing with construction noise and the kind of balance of new projects becoming old projects, becoming residents, becoming frustrated at new projects, becoming... and obviously, there's not much on the East Bank right now, but over the time, we'll have more and more residents there than being impacted by construction projects. And with the downtown code sub-district, we have an opportunity to figure out what that looks like. Do we have a sense of what kind of noise regulations might be? Is that something that we want to explore down the road? Is it something that is kind of sooner? Obviously, today it doesn't really matter that much, but as residents start to fill in, what's that going to look like?
This isn't a topic that we've talked a lot about during the negotiations, but it fits in the category of things where the administration's commitment to Fallon has been that we're going to ask for a lot about types of uses, like we've been talking about, affordability, et cetera. But when it comes to special rules that would apply only to the East Bank for things that are covered by other existing law, like noise, that the ask was that they comply with applicable ordinances. And so we haven't put any energy whatsoever into coming up with special rules about noise on the East Bank, and would anticipate that they would have to live by whatever the noise rules are that are applicable generally.
Okay, thanks. We talk a lot about party buses in my district. I know we're talking about not having the party cross the river. Would that be something running through the TLC to decide what routes, if any, look like on the East Bank, or where would that start to come in?
Yeah, that'll be a good problem to have, because that'll mean that people live over there. Part of our thinking about, I mean, that's sort of a flippant answer. A more serious answer is that we believe that there's not a science to this, but we believe that the party bus circuit closely aligns with concentrations of bars. And so part of the thought process behind one of the things we'll have when you see the downtown code change is for this sub-district, there would be rules against concentration of bars. And our hope would be that if you remove concentration of bars, you limit the interest of the industry of going that route.
Okay, thank you. Just kind of running through the hot buttons of my district right now, I guess. We know that there's going to be construction and obviously residences and hotels and things like that, and we're going to have green space in large scale discussed in further phases. But what would the tree greenery planting look like as it pertains to kind of the residential uses that we're going to see in the first phase?
For this, really the best we can do at this point is to say, check out Imagine East Bank. That's what we're driving towards. With nothing having been designed yet, there's no tree count in particular. We do intend to have the goals of Imagine East Bank be met by the time it's constructed. So other than telling you that in the long run, that's the goal, we don't have any details above and beyond that. This is another one where we've got increasingly more intense rules about this for development generally, and we anticipate that Fallon will have to live by the rules that everybody else has to live by.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got for now.
Sure.
Chair, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. When I think about the East Bank, I think this is a great opportunity for our city in our city to get it right. And I wanted to echo your comments about the workforce. I think the protection against wage theft, the development piece, and the classification piece are very, very important. And so I just want to add the emphasis that I'd love, 10 years from now for other cities to talk about what a great job we have done in this area. So just a comment to echo the importance of this piece.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen, anything?
Yeah, thank you. One more thing on affordable housing. I, again, am grateful that that's been given the emphasis that it has, because it's such an important thing that we continue to hear the need for. I had asked you this question about, there's a parcel in, I think it's parcel G, that currently is slated for office down the road because nobody's building offices right now, and there's a 10-year waiting period until maybe the market gets better for that. And I had asked about the possibility of maybe shortening that to 4 years and seeing if nobody wants offices, maybe we could pivot to housing and some more affordable housing at that point. If you can sort of speak to your response on that.
Sure, and after I sent that to you, it was late on Sunday. I wasn't sure how good a job I did on that, so hopefully it made sense. But here's the deal. Planning and the mayor's office would both like to have office uses on the East Bank. We think having part of a successful mixed-use environment like we have in parts of downtown, like we have in the Gulch, will be a combination of people living there and working there and coming for entertainment. We think that's what will drive neighborhood. So we really, really, really would like office uses. But you can't build an office building today. You can't get it financed. When I've been on a little tour of real estate development folks, and one of the things I ask is, when do you think you'll be able to finance an office building in Nashville? And the answers range from, boy, I hope in a couple of years it starts to turn around, to, I don't know, 10 years if we're lucky. And it has more to do with the national market and trends for where people work post-COVID than it has to do with Nashville. I think one of the things we know about Nashville living here is that economic downturns tend to be shorter. We get into it later, we come out of it earlier, just because we've got so much growth going on here for so long. So I personally expect the office market to turn around better here than other places. But I wouldn't bet somebody else's money. I wouldn't bet my money on it. And so shortening it up to any amount of time less than 10 years, we feel like runs a material risk of just not having any office space on the East Bank, which is not our Metro's desired result, not the planning department's desired result, not Fallon's desired result. And so 10 is where we came up with, and we really don't want to force out the office use by requiring something else after 4 years.
So I think about, I can only visualize acres in terms of Elmington Park is 11 acres. So 30 acres is probably twice as big as Elmington Park. Would, if someone who is owning property nearby in the part that's not in the initial development area wanted to do an office building in 10 years, that could fulfill that need? And I'm trying to think, that's maybe a couple of blocks walk. I don't have a good feel for how far offices need to be to count as being part of the neighborhood.
Yeah, maybe a more helpful area is the Gulch is about 60 acres. So
Half the Gulch.
Consider this half the Gulch with a football stadium in the middle of it. And so it is a lot of space. My view is that if you looked at half the Gulch and you said no office buildings in half of it, I think it would be a peculiar result. And what I think about it really doesn't matter a whole lot. This is a topic where I'm relying heavily on what the planning department has recommended. And these guidelines that we've negotiated have been largely driven off of the expertise of the planning department, not the mayor's office making value judgments. And so especially because I feel like we're reflecting the expertise of our planning department, I feel like we really need to try to give office a fair chance in our 30 acres.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate the discussion.
Sure. No problem. Thank
Other
you.
questions?
All right, so we've gone around twice now. Councilmember Evans, Teagle, anything else? All right, does anybody have any burning questions, comments, asks? Councilmember Cap.
I have a couple quick ones if the chair doesn't mind. Earlier, Director Mendes, there was a discussion about hotel uses in residential buildings. I just wanted to clarify that that would not apply to the buildings that in the lease, their entire use is specified, such as the 100% affordable
Correct.
buildings, and this would be potentially applicable in something like parcel F, where the uses are less defined.
Correct.
So this would not apply to those buildings that the uses are spoken for?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And just a short plug from the east side, with full recognition that this area is District 19, but since it came up, the idea of party buses crossing the river, certainly District 6 would oppose anything going into District 6, but I would just strike a note of caution that anything coming across the river would, of course, also be crossing our connections back and forth across the river. And so I just want to sound a cautionary note there if anybody's contemplating that.
Well, let's put this under the, this comment does not reflect the views of my employer. But like, just from when I was in the council, like, you all know the difficulty with regulating entertainment vehicles and the constant overhang of threat from the state. And so part of the reason to focus on concentration of bars is because anybody who claimed that they knew the future of entertainment vehicles would be, we would hate to rely on that, the ability to regulate them as the sole way to control the environment. And so in trying to push it toward things that Fallon and Metro can collectively control, if we've got a handle on concentration of bars, we, after a ton of thought about how we can possibly crack the nut of having something that sticks, that doesn't run a risk of being taken from us or changed from us, zoning should exclusively be within y'all's control. And we're hopeful that the concentration of bars issue cracks the nut.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I think we will close the meeting. I want to thank administration team, Bob Mendes, Fallon, and planning for their hard work on this, all the other stakeholders in the room for your participation, council staff, and Metro Nashville Network for staying late with us here this evening. So we appreciate y'all, and thanks everyone for being here.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.